been interesting to follow the trend of used video game prices over the last few months and the effects the health crisis had on those, as they seem to really peak in April and May when you saw things like Wii Sports going for $20 and it was just maddening. But what's crazy is, in a lot of cases, these prices have roughly maintained even as more stores have began to open, including some retro game stores reopening, GameStop, of course, opening as well in many states. So despite this, the game prices have remained relatively high for a lot of older titles, particularly ones from, say, the PlayStation 2, original Xbox, Wii, the kind of the mid-2000s. And the same has been true for the console prices themselves, as they've remained relatively high. Now, there are video game charting websites, I'll have one link down in the description, that actually follow the price of used games, and it's kind of cool to see how they decline or even increase in value as time goes on. So a lot of cool data to work with there. Now, I can't find information for consoles, but I can tell you those have definitely trended upwards as well. And even for common consoles, you think of things like the Wii, the PlayStation 2, there were so many of those sold that I never imagined a world where they would cost more than $50, because they'd been consistently available around that price range for years, and now you're seeing that at about 30 to 50% higher of a price now coming in at eBay to get a working one with the cables. Ironically, this news also comes at the same time that there's rumors that there may be a $70 price point for many new AAA titles in the next-gen platforms. So seeing these older games stay up in price is kind of interesting as well, when you consider the fact that someone like myself actually is kind of leaning more towards playing these older games now, just because I'm kind of fed up with the current state of gaming and the monetization practices that they continue to follow. And I've always been an advocate for these older games over the past few years, particularly the ones from the early 2000s that we're seeing jump in price, because that early to mid 2000s time period, I feel like the graphic drop-off, though obvious as some of those games are in standard definition, isn't that severe. I really think when you put something side by side like Battle of Bikini Bottom that just recently had a re-release, that's a case where I feel like those PS2 graphics really aren't all that bad, and that game is very playable still today. It's not Link's Awakening. It didn't have this huge graphic overhaul. Sure, it's improved, but it's not like the older version is at all unplayable to me or severely dated. So you can blame the current increase on prices on the health pandemic, but I think there's so much more to it than that. I think that there's became more of a culture around collecting video games. I think as more people begin to engage in that as a hobby and get back into older games, like it seems like there's so much of a force behind. I know we saw a handful of years ago there was a lot of cartridge-based systems that people were wanting to collect. I feel like we're moving now towards maybe the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2. That's kind of the time period people are seeking to collect for. I also think that as time goes on, you're going to see the amount of copies out there in the wild of these games begin to diminish as they wear out, and I think that disc rot is definitely a real problem that we could run into in the future. That's why I'm such a big advocate for modding the systems, playing backup copies, because I think that one day that may be the only reasonable direction you can take, and you're already seeing that with some games out there. Some of them are just simply the prices are astronomical. I mean, hundreds of dollars to purchase a used copy of a game that came out 15 years ago, and some people just simply cannot justify that, and that's where emulators and playing backups I think definitely comes more and more into play as time goes on. We have to work to preserve these titles, which I think the modding community has done a great job of. And this is not to say that I want to see more games remastered or re-released, particularly from this time period and even the late 2000s. I've seen so many Xbox 360 games re-released on the Xbox One with some slight tune-ups, and to me, that's just not justified of a purchase for anybody, particularly when these titles can be made backwards compatible so that the original disc or the original digital purchase can be played at the Xbox 360 version, rather than this unnecessary Xbox One re-release that we've seen time and time again, I hope does not continue into the next console generation. And speaking of the Xbox 360, I think that that is one of the few systems that hasn't had its prices particularly damaged as a part of this ongoing price hike. I think that pretty soon the Xbox 360 is going to be in the same situation that I found the PlayStation 2 and the original Xbox to be in just a handful of years ago. It's going to be old to the point where nobody wants it, but not old enough that anybody suspects the games are worth anything. And I think that's when we're going to see more and more people just kind of selling off Xbox 360 games for $1 or $2 a piece. And I think you're already seeing that. I know I went into my local pawn shop here a few months ago before this all started with the craziness, the price increases, and I was picking up games 99 cents each. They just flat out priced them all the same. They weren't worried about if it was a game that was maybe going for 20 online or 15 online. They just said they're all Xbox 360 and PS3 games, 99 cents. And I think that we're going to see that become more common as time goes on. Because of that, I think it's a great time actually to start collecting for the Xbox 360 in particular, just knowing that so many of those games are being re-released on the newer platforms, and for the most part it's not warranted whatsoever. The Xbox 360 really not that outdated of a platform when you look at the graphics. You compare it to current gen and what's coming next gen. I just think that the increases we've seen each console generation continues to diminish and decrease in its ability to blow me away. This isn't, 2000 and the graphics on the PlayStation 2 blew me away. That's not the case anymore. Nothing is really that mind-blowing to me because I feel like we're already at pretty good graphics, and any improvements we get from here are just slight bits. So if you're looking for a good deal on an older console, keep your eyes open. I think you'll be able to find one eventually, but you got to be patient for it. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey. I'll see you in the next video.